I'm just listening to the papers there and looking at the actual title of this session. I think it's been extremely modest in a way, because it's called Library Support for Online and Blended Learning and Teaching, but it certainly could be library innovation. It could be about library future-proofing in these areas as a common thread through it. And some of the other common threads, before I put it out to the floor, I think we've seen an awful lot about relationship building, about risk mitigation in lots of different ways, and also real partnerships. So that's my 3 R's to kick us off, but I will not abuse my position as chair just yet in terms of my questions. Can I open it to the floor, please? Is that Armin there?
Yeah, Armin, UL. I have a question for Matt and Katerina. What is, when we look at the virtual reading rooms, where's the delimitation to services like digitization on demand? Because it takes a lot of staff time. You take the stuff out of storage. So wouldn't it be easier to just digitize them and then they are available for others to look at as well? So where's the difference there, and advantages and disadvantages?
Thank you.
It's been a really interesting question, and it's something that's been explored in the working group that we've convened. So I think in the early stages, when buildings were still in partial lockdown, digitisation teams often weren't on site. So the virtual reading room was providing quick access remotely when digitisation wasn't at full capacity. One of the things that's been really interesting in the research is how one of the key motivations for academics requesting a virtual reading room service is to decide whether they would like a piece digitising or not. So they will request an appointment, see the item virtually through the VRR service, and on that point decide whether they would like to request a digitised copy to be made. So that relationship between digitisation and VRRs is really interesting, and one of the things that is published online is a decision tree, which has been produced by the working group that we've been convening. And that decision tree, it's been modelled on what's being used at the University of Edinburgh, is at what point is a virtual reading room appointment most appropriate, and at what point is a quick digitised copy most appropriate. So that is an active conversation that will be happening within individual institutions on a case-by-case basis. Christine, do you have anything?
Works? Yeah. Yes, I agree completely, with what Matt said. So in this second survey, we also saw that, many institutions have started to just revise what they've learned from this first 2 years of running the services during the pandemic, and trying to review digitization strategies to see what they've learned can fit within what they offer currently, and what can be revised or offered as a new service. So some of the challenges that could be of that, usually, I guess it was for researchers. I guess they could ask for something to be digitized if they wanted that, and through how often the materials were requested. So very often institutions could make a decision about what is considered of value to researchers, and that could be digitized and be permanently available online. But there was a danger that they're expressed by some, that if there are some specific items requested all the time, there's a danger that other items from the collections are not utilized and are not promoted. And okay, what do we do about that? So that was some of the thinking that was going on.
Thank you very much. Next question, and I might ask you to introduce yourself as well, please.
Hi, Sarah, I'm Kennedy from TU Dublin, and my question is for Michelle. So really good presentation. Just, you mentioned there, the students that are coming in now from second level into third level, and they are, my own daughter, she's in a Microsoft school, so from day one, she's tech savvy. She comes in, she knows Teams, pre-pandemic, she was familiar with it already, OneNote, all those. But was there, you mentioned the first year and then the second year, was there any learnings for you in terms of what the students dictated, in terms of the content that you were creating for them to learn from. So did you, what you created in the first year, was there anything new added from the learnings from the first group of students?
Yeah, so the programme expanded from 2020, so it went from, I think, about maybe 7-8 workshops in 2020. And because of the things, so we did feedback from students after the first iteration of it, and the things that we added in the second year, glasses. The things we added in the second year, Sarah, were more on PowerPoint, funny enough that you mentioned Microsoft, and that was because we brought in the EDTL intern student and brought in really some more IT instruction into it in the second year. Another one we added in the second year that wasn't in the first year, Microsoft Word for your assignments. So it was really the productivity tools. So the students asked for more on graphic design, more on multimedia, and more on, they didn't call them productivity tools, but it was stuff to do my academic work. Unfortunately, we just couldn't get someone to do the multimedia bit, so we made it PowerPoint focused, and really it addressed their needs for that piece. So it evolved in the second year and evolved again in the third year, and I suppose, look, that's a pattern we see, isn't it, that the offerings just keep needing to be refreshed and topped up.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the floor? Yes, please. Evelyn.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Flanagan. I'm from UCD, so I have a question for Matt and Christina. I was wondering, with the virtual reading rooms and sort of going back to the digitisation question, would you have made in-copyright material available via the virtual reading room, and would that be part of your decision tree in looking at the digitisation versus the virtual reading room?
I can say some quick comments on that. So we found that generally libraries were following the same when they were delivering the virtual reading room services, and they were using material from the collection. So they were using almost the same rules that they were using in physical library visits. So they were. So depending on whether something was, depending on the copyright and whether something could be photographed, for example, or not. So that would be, so the users would be informed about that, and then they will complete a form if required, and so on.
There was a really interesting question at the very start of this, whether virtual reading rooms constituted broadcasting. And that was something that was discussed early on in some of the working groups. I think it reflects as well, people were finding their way, but going back to Christina's point that soon the virtual reading room users being required to sign copyright declarations in the same way that they would if they were in a physical reading room was something we saw increasingly being used. But the broadcasting element is a really interesting one in terms of, and I don't think we could say definitively one way or the other.
Yeah. Can I ask another question about the virtual teaching spaces? Because I think it makes sense to have a virtual teaching space during a pandemic when the students can't come in, and I would have done myself some very, very amateur tours of a special collection space and uploaded them to YouTube privately and then made available via the VLE. But that was, I kind of saw as an emergency answer to a problem, and I'm just wondering, like, who's doing this work now in the post-pandemic world when you also have your reading rooms open? And it seems laborious, I suppose, to be doing both, you know?
Yeah, so in terms of the virtual teaching spaces, though, so at the moment there are some mixed approaches. I guess some institutions are continuing to use that, but generally academics are encouraged to do the physical, to return to physical teaching. But some institutions still would like to take advantage from the possibilities that the virtual can offer, like doing hybrid sessions and blended sessions. But yeah, with regards to the virtual teaching spaces at the moment, there is a mixed response, I think, and institutions are trying to figure out how they could take what they would do as the next steps for the services.
I think just one final thing on virtual teaching spaces is the potential use that we're seeing around widening participation, around engagement with geographically distant school groups and communities, in source communities of collections. So I think there is that wider application now of virtual teaching spaces beyond the institutional students, and how can we engage with groups far beyond the institution, even as part of student recruitment, as a way of showcasing collections internationally in a really engaging way, which not only showcases the collection, and I think this is one of the things that's come really strongly from this, is showcasing the expertise and the passion and enthusiasm of the staff through this as well. It's not just about access, it's actually about this curated experience that I think we're seeing through some of these systems as well. But they're labour intensive, they're bespoke, and they are unlikely to ever be of mass application. I think that's something that's really been appreciated.
Great, thank you, Evelyn. I might just take the opportunity to ask Martha. Martha, in terms of your the social interoperability model that you've talked about, could you comment whether colleagues in other units across UCD Library are now looking at this as a kind of potential part of the way they engage on whatever area they might be working on?
The answer is this is the first time I have spoken about this topic.
Hot off the press.
I hope that there was engagement with it, because for me it has been an invaluable tool.
Yeah.
Just that realization that it's not enough to understand who your stakeholders are. You really have to engage with what they're trying to do, where they are, and what you are doing can help, how what you are doing can help what they're doing. And because that's the only way in which an initiative can run, really. So.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everybody in the audience for engaging, and the word expertise has been mentioned multiple times, so I think we can definitely see from what we've heard today that there is a phenomenal amount of expertise here, and they've shared an awful lot of information that I think we can take with us and ruminate on or let it ferment later or something like that. I'd like to thank our timekeeper, Udimesi here, and colleagues in AV here, and take the opportunity to wrap up. It's lunchtime, everything kicks back off again at 2:25 in this room and the Wogan Suite, O'Brien Suite upstairs. And finally, just to thank our speakers in the usual way.